Hello. Can everyone hear me? Or see me? There should be a little chat option in the top right. If you guys want to try that out to say hi. If not, you might not be able to see me. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I had it on the wrong thing. Yay! Hi, everyone. Wonderful. This is amazing. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I really appreciate it. I have decided to do this talk along with, well, in collaboration with Quiet Connections, as we're helping to raise funds for the BDMLR's new seal hospital in Cornwall, which is really exciting. So I think Stacey and Hayley and Phil are all going to be joining as well. They'll be on the chat. And I will also have a look. If you've got any questions, feel free to type them in. Try and answer them. Not like 100% sure I'll be able to, but I will give it my best go. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to get started. So first of all, hi. I thought I'd start off with telling you guys a little bit about my sort of journey through how I got into marine life generally. So I started off working at the Seal Sanctuary down in Gweek in 2017, I think it was, and it was just a little part-time job. I was just on the desk type thing up there. Eventually I progressed to doing sort of talks, which was terrifying, but if I needed a job and wanted a job, then I had to do them. So I did some talks. But then as I kind of progressed, I started volunteering as a marketing assistant there as well. So that got me really learning about the different animals. And I kind of became completely seal obsessed. As once a lot of people start to notice seals, you will, become very engaged with them. They're very charismatic. So yeah, that's kind of where it all started. And then from there, I went out to the Azores, which is where this photo was taken. And I helped volunteer out there for a little while with a whale watching company, which also did sort of photo ID and things like that. So that was really fascinating. Saw so many amazing creatures, sperm whales, blue whales, loads of different types of dolphins, and it was just amazing. I worked as a little bit of a wildlife guide as well, which again I wasn't very good at. Most of the people spoke different languages, and I can only speak English, so it was quite hard. Hi Hayley, thank you for joining. So yeah, that was kind of what happened next. So I was out there for I think about 5 weeks or so. It was a really amazing experience. I definitely recommend the Azores to anyone that loves the marine life. It's an absolutely incredible place. Most people haven't heard of it, so it's still very sort of untouched. I don't know if any of you would have seen it or not, but there was a man called Pedro, which is a lovely Portuguese name, and he actually did a talk in Cornwall in 2017, which was when I first saw it and heard about the Azores and all the marine life out there. And so I contacted him, and that's how I ended up going out there. So that was, he runs Azores experiences, and he offers sort of volunteer places to people. So, and as well, it's amazing because you don't have to pay to volunteer with him. It's really good. He even pays for your accommodation, so that's really kind. So if anyone wants to go out there, I can give you his contact details as well. It's definitely worth going out, Kate. Absolutely incredible. So when I got back from the Azores, I started working 2 different jobs. I wanted to carry on with a bit of wildlife guiding, so I ended up doing a little bit for Marine Discovery Penzance. I went out on a few trips with them, but the season finished quite quickly. We had a lot of bad rain and stuff, so we didn't end up going out much. But it was incredible to see what was like literally off the coast of, Penzance. And there was so much. There was Minky Whales and about 300 common dolphins feeding on different trips. They saw, I think they saw pilot whales on one of the trips. So I wasn't on that one, unfortunately. I was back in the office, but you know, it's just amazing to see people's faces when they get to see these incredible creatures. And then I also started working at Lobster Hatchery in Pedestal. So I started off as a visitor assistant again, just working on the front desk and talking to people about lobsters, which is quite a niche market. But you'll be amazed at how many people actually love lobsters by the end of it. So hopefully by the end of this talk as well, you'll also love lobsters as much as I do. So I still work for the Lobster Hatchery as well. I work as sort of a marketing person. For a little while, I did some research as well. So I was working on a fishing boat in some very horrible conditions, lots of hail and seasickness, and yeah, got to have a tough stomach for that one. So that's something to think about if you ever fancy working on a fishing boat. And I've done some other things as well. I've sort of volunteered with Cornwall Wildlife Trust for quite a few things. So they do the shore search, which is their rockpooling surveys. That's always really interesting to do, especially once COVID's over. You get sort of a group of you out and you just get to go and see what's in your local rock pools together. I always find it really useful as well because there's more eyes. Sometimes you can't spot anything, but everyone else can. So you're like, oh yes, this is wonderful. The other thing I've done is the Marine Strandings Network, which is where you go out and you actually survey any sort of basically dead animals that have washed up, which is never very pleasant, but at the same time it's really fascinating to see what's coming up where, and sometimes I'll take it off for post-mortem and you get to see why they're washing up. So sort of whether it's due to marine plastics or things like that, or sometimes it can just be naturally very bad storms, which seals are unfortunately affected by. And then finally, my favourite one that I probably still do is called Sequest Southwest, which you guys, again, you can sign up for. It's fun, it's free. But basically, all you do is you stand on top of a cliff and you look at the sea for 2 hours and you see what you can see. And it's really fascinating because a lot of the time you don't set that time aside to just go and stare at the sea. But when you do, it's like, yeah, all sorts pop up. So it's really worth doing. So now I've also started university because I wanted to expand my knowledge, and everything I knew so far was kind of self-taught and off of my wonderful peers. So I started at university doing conservation and ecology, which is really fun and I'm really enjoying it. And of course, I now work for the lovely Quiet Connections as well, which are an absolutely wonderful team. And I think a lot of you are here tonight from them too, which is amazing. I really want to sort of use the opportunity for Quiet Connections as well to understand the benefits that nature can have on our mental well-being. It changed my life completely. So I'm hoping that it can help other people as well. Amazing. So we'll get on to some lovely animals now, because that's quite a long time talking about me. So we'll start off with the grey seals, which is, of course, basically why we are doing this talk. So we get two types of seals in Cornwall, grey seals being one of them. We actually have around 40% of the UK population, 40% of the world's population of grey seals even around the UK, which is an absolutely astonishing amount. They are quite rare as a species, but it's amazing we've got them around our coast, especially around here in Cornwall, because we've got a lot of rocky shores and they tend to prefer sort of rocky haul-outs. So yeah, that's really good. These are the ones as well that are born in those lovely fluffy white coats that are very cute. And after about 3 weeks, they'll lose those fluffy white coats and come into their lovely speckledy ones that you can see in the picture here. Now, what's really cool is that these patterns on their sort of coats after they've molted their fluffy baby coats will stay on them for life. So we can ID them from 3 weeks old up until 25, 30 years old, which is about how long they live till. So we can see where they're going. They've been seen to go down to Spain, back up to sort of Ireland, and then back to Cornwall again. So they travel really, really far, which is incredible to sort of see their journeys. And they're left, so once they've lost that fluffy white coat as well, which I find really crazy, is they're left by their mum at about 3 weeks old. So they're 3 weeks old and that's it then. They're kind of left to fend for themselves. So it's pretty incredible, really, that these tiny little pups are just suddenly thrown out there, especially when you see some of those seas that have been on our coast, especially at the moment. It's pretty crazy to think about. So they have to learn everything on like how to fish. And the other thing as well is there's a lot of angry male seals at that time, because as they pup, as the females sort of give birth, they then breed with the males again. So it's a very competitive time, shall we say, on the shoreline. So those poor grey seals, as the pup, also have to compete with some of the adults, which is a bit scary. And then we've also got common seals. So we don't get as many common seals around here in Cornwall. I can't say I've actually ever spotted one, I don't think. Might have seen one or two. This one was taken at the seal sanctuary. It's one of their resident seals. It's either Buddy or Beau, I think it was called. But you can see that their patterning is quite different. It's more like spotty rather than this kind of mottly that you can see. So that's a quite good way to ID them. The other thing is I always find is their faces are more chubby. And I think that, like, I always compare sort of grey seals as like Labradors, and then like kind of more, I don't know, round-faced chubby common seals. I think they're super cute. I don't know, they might be my favourite. But yeah, they're really, really cool. Seals are incredible as well because their whiskers are 10,000 times more sensitive than our fingertips, which means they can basically hunt pretty much in the dark. So they can literally feel the fish coming, which is incredible. So they've got some pretty amazing abilities, and they can also stay underwater for about 45 minutes at a time, which is really long for something that small. If you think a sort of a sperm whale on average can stay underwater for about 50 minutes at a time, it's pretty incredible to compare the two. So they're really cool. So I'm going to talk a little bit briefly about seal rehab as well, because obviously this is what the BDMLR do. They help rehabilitate the seals, rescue them, rehabilitate them, and then release them back into the ocean where they belong. So it's really cool. I think they've rescued already over 120 this year, which is crazy. The pupping season tends to be from September until March. So yeah, 120 in that sort of couple of months is yeah, pretty mad. So this is what a kind of a rescue looks like. There was unfortunately quite a lot of people were wandering past while this one was being rescued, which is never very fun for the seal. But I actually remember this one, I got to name it, which is very exciting. It was called Morwell, and this was it, probably about 2 or 3 days old. So to rescue them, you do a health check on the beach, see what's going on basically. They might have sort of a ruckly sound in their breathing, they could have a snotty nose, kind of like we do if we're ill. They might have physical wounds, sometimes net entanglement and things like that. So if they can sort it out on the beach, they will, which is really good. That way, you know, it's less stress for the seal. They can go straight back into the sea and it's just done. But unfortunately, if it's a little bit more serious, if it might need some antibiotics, if it needs some feeding, they'll have to come in to the hospital. So after it's been rescued, this is more winner again. It took a few, I think it's about a week old now, which is so cute. Yeah, during the rehabilitation period, it might involve feeding and antibiotics, like I said, but you also then have to keep them and raise them up and basically teach them to be a seal. That 3-week period where they probably learn to fish and things like that with their mum, they obviously don't have that. So you basically have to teach them how to eat fish rather than milk. And you also have to make sure you dissociate humans and food, basically. So it can be a lot of hiding whilst you throw fish in a pool and run away. So yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of hours. Sometimes when they're this young as well, they need feeding every, I think it was 4 hours. So it needs a lot of overnight time as well. So you can see how hard it really is for all the volunteers. It is crazy, Kate, isn't it? It's just yeah, a really long process. And then finally, once they're all healthy and happy, oh, this is them. This is one that was just happily learning to fish in the pool, looking very content. It comes to release day, which is obviously the best day. So yeah, they'll often pick a quiet location. Sometimes if there's a few pups that need to go out at once, they'll release them all together. But sometimes I'll release them on their own as well. Try and do it sort of early in the morning and not to tell a lot of people, just so that, you know, it's nice and safe and calm for the pups. They're not very social animals though, so once they get out into the sea, they're probably never going to see their little seal buddies again. That's it for them. They're off. I'm not sure if you can see in the photo though. They've got a little tag on their rear flippers. So sometimes if you're looking out at different seal coves and you spot one of those tags, you can send it either to the Seal Group Research Trust, or I think to the Seal Sanctuary, and they can help ID that seal for you, so they can tell you sort of when and where it was released, whether it's been sighted since then. And it also helps us and sort of everyone able to track their population. So sometimes you'll see a tag, it might look kind of strange and different, but it could be a seal that was released in Ireland or something. So it's really interesting to see their journeys through these tags. So I definitely recommend, if you ever spot one with a tag, get in touch with the Seal Group Research Trust. I think that's how they say it now. Yes, that's my little bit on seals for you. And now we're going to look at spotting different cetaceans. So that's whales and dolphins and porpoises as well. Me too. So some useful things that you will need for looking out for cetaceans. Binoculars are very useful. Sometimes you can see them with the eye, but binoculars definitely help. A lot of time and patience especially. I can't tell you how many times we were sat on the cliffs and seen nothing for 6-7 hours on end, and then gone home only to find that there was a humpback whale 3 minutes after we left. That was a very sad time. But eventually you put the time and effort in and you will see something. A hot drink is always good as well. Take some hot drinks and some food. Some good company too. There's normally some lovely people out on the cliffs. I said, if you get involved with SeaQuest Southwest, there's normally groups of people that will go out, so you can join others and meet new people. Or if you do like being on your own, it's totally fine. Go sit on a cliff and look at the sea. It's lovely. And then the other wonderful thing to look out for are these beautiful birds. I had to include a bird because I absolutely love birds. And these are gannets. So they're quite easy to identify. They're humongous. They've got about a 6-foot wingspan. So pretty huge. You can see that incredibly sharp beak as well. And they can dive at about 60 miles an hour. So you'll often see them diving in the sea, going under and then popping back out again. They are just incredible creatures. What I also find really interesting, if you ever get close enough to them, as they're diving, they start to squawk. And that's basically to tell any other gannets that are diving, like, get out of my way, just in case I impale you. So yeah, I think they're pretty cool creatures. As well, the Cornish name for them is Sather, which means arrow in Cornish, and you can kind of see why, especially when if you watch them dive, they form this lovely arrow shape. So yeah, they're really beautiful birds to watch out for. But the other thing is, when gannets are diving, it often means that something is pushing that fish to the surface. So that normally means when dolphins are feeding or whales are feeding, you'll often see gannets diving around them. So it's really, really good sign. If you're looking for cetaceans, look out for gannets diving, and hopefully, sort of 95% of the time, there's going to be some cetaceans underneath, which is really cool. So we're going to move on to our first animal, or our first whale, which is the beautiful humpback whale. Now this, as you can see, was seen by St. Michael's Mount in Mounts Bay. Mounts Bay is a really, really important place for wildlife. It's an incredible, sort of zone for it. And yeah, the humpback whales, I think it was last sighted last week, I think. So it's now been on the Cornish coast for 65 days. It was sighted in the Isles of Scilly last week. You can, Stacey. Yeah, you can definitely see dolphins and things off the south coast. The humpback, I'm not sure if it's been seen up that far, but you can definitely see sort of minky whales. From what I know, the humpback has stayed around Penzance Way. So yeah, it's the one that I've been looking out for about 3 years now. They're quite a recent addition. You didn't really get them in Cornwall very much. Then I think there was a sighting about 3 or 4 years ago. And then since then they've been seen every year, but this is the longest one has stayed around. And I know it's the same one because if you look at the fluke, which is the tail here, you can actually ID a whale through that tail, essentially. And it's really useful as well because humpbacks show their tail when they dive, whereas a lot of whales, when they dive, they don't actually show the tail. So you have to use other things like dorsal fin on top of their back to try and ID them. But humpbacks, luckily, have this lovely tail that they like to show off. So that's really, really wonderful. I was going to show you a video here, but I couldn't download it off of YouTube to put on here. So here's a screenshot instead. Now humpbacks as well, you can hopefully see through this photo, they're really awesome because they've got these really long pectoral fins, which are the long arms on the side basically. And they're really white underneath. I always call them kind of like the ballerinas of the sea because they're the ones that jump out and they'll do all the flips and things, and people have seen them doing that off the coast of Penzance, which is incredible, I think. Still one that I am waiting to see though, but hopefully one day. But yeah, I will hopefully send you guys a link of this video if you haven't already seen it. It was quite popular in the news, but it's the drone footage of the humpback whale just swimming past, I think it was Logan's Rock near Land's End. And it's just, yeah, it's amazing to watch. It's so, so cool. Oh, that's amazing, Phil. That's so cool. Yeah, it's so lovely to see dolphins. I think Port Leven's one of the ones that tends to see them a lot. That's really awesome. Lovely. Cool. So, as well, I was going to mention here, so all the whales we tend to get around the Cornish coast have these baleen plates, which is like these feathery kind of bristles in their mouth. So you do get toothed whales as well, which tend to be like the sperm whales and things. But all these lovely baleen whales, they're filter feeders, so they tend to eat krill and smaller fish and plankton. But yeah, it's really incredible. If you ever go to museums and stuff, they sometimes have these baleen plates, and it's really fascinating. There's just rows upon rows of them. It always reminds me of Finding Nemo when they're stuck in the whale's mouth. Yeah. So that's just what their feeding's like, basically. So next, going to move on to the sei whale. Now, sei whales, you sometimes see them in Cornwall. It's quite rare. These two photos that I've got here on the right-hand side are from the Azores. But I just wanted to show you the fin. You can see that their fin is a lot more curved. It's more of a, I kind of think of it as like a scythe, just like really, really curved back. So they're, yeah, they are essentially a small version of a fin whale, which you do get, is that on my next one? Yeah, which you do get around the coast of Cornwall as well. They are quite hard to spot though, in a sense, because instead of surfacing and staying on the surface like a lot of whales do, the sei whale tends to surface once, still below, and then goes back under again for a couple of minutes, and it's like, where's it gone? So you have to really keep your eyes open. We think we did spot one out when I was with Marine Discovery, but we couldn't tell whether it was a sei or a minky at that time. Yeah, it's amazing how many whales you get around. You don't notice it at all unless you're like, you know, really looking. But yeah, these tend to grow to around 14 to 20 meters. So they're kind of like a medium-sized whale, still pretty massive. But as you'll see, the only bit you tend to see is just the top there. So you don't really get a huge sense of scale of how wonderful they are unless you get a drone photo like this, or you see them underwater. But it's still really cool just to see a fin, I think. Awesome. So next we're going to move on to the fin whale. The fin whales are so, so cool. They are the second largest whale on the planet, and I can't believe that we get them around the Cornish coast. Really excitingly, there was actually one spotted off of Newquay yesterday that was there for around 5 or 6 hours, which I found out about this morning. But I think that's so, so cool. It was close enough in to see with your eye as well. You didn't have to have binoculars. So that's incredible. So it's worth getting out there and just seeing what you can see, because you'll be surprised what pops up. They can eat as well. Oh, no way, Kate. It was on Towan Headland. That's a really good place. There's a couple of birders up there that sit there and they watch the birds. But if you go out early enough, they'll have a chat to you and they'll tell you if they've spotted any dolphins or whales as well, which is always nice. So yeah, they weigh about 72 tons, which is incredible. And they can live for about 90 years. So really, really long-lived creatures. What I find amazing is they'll eat about 1.8 tons of krill or plankton a day, which you just can't imagine. So it just shows we must have really, really rich feeding grounds around Cornwall if all these whales are coming around, especially at the moment. Why that is, we kind of don't know. I guess it could be because of global warming. You know, it's bringing this very nutrient-rich water in though, so it's kind of good in one sense. It's having a positive for us to be able to see these lovely creatures. They think there's about 35,000 individuals of fin whale left in the North Atlantic. So, you know, not overly many left, which makes it even more special when you see them. They can travel about 90 miles a day as well. So it's pretty impressive lengths that they can cover. That's always the sort of worry when you see a whale or someone else sees a whale and like, oh, there's a whale today. And then you're like, right, tomorrow I'm going to go find it. And then you find out they're like 90 miles somewhere else. And it's like, all right. And then next, I'm going to move on to our most common whale that we get around Cornwall. And that's the beautiful Minky Whale. Now, the Minky Whale is the smallest whale that exists, essentially. It's only about 10 meters, so it's not quite as big as everyone else. It's got a very narrow head, as you can see. It's very streamlined, and a really useful ID feature is the water is quite flat and calm. You'll be able to see these lovely white sort of pectoral fins on the side again through the water, so you can see these lovely white arms that sort of help to ID them. Again, they'll tend to surface once or a couple of times in a row and then go down for 8 minutes. They can only hold their breath for about 8 minutes. So they do very shallow diving, which is pretty, I always think that's like crazy when we were talking about the seals. And, you know, they can hold their breath for about 40 minutes. And then this incredibly like large creature can only hold its breath for 8. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So I think that's all our lovely whales. If anyone has any questions as well, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm aware of talking quite a lot, so you're welcome to, yeah. One other thing I forgot to mention, which I think is really cool, is that the fin whale, a really useful way to ID them, you can see it on this photo, but half of its jaw is white and the other half of its jaw is black. And they think that that is a way to basically, what they'll do is they'll surround the fish with this white side of them, and it makes the fish form into like a tighter and tighter and tighter ball. and then they'll just come in and swoop basically, and they'll have all the fish in one go. So they think it's a really clever sort of natural design that allows them to feed in a more sort of efficient way. Yeah, I just thought it was really, really cool. Yeah, it's amazing. There's so many whales. They're so cool. Awesome. So next, I'm going to move on to dolphins. So hopefully you guys have seen some dolphins. If you haven't, go and stare at the sea for a couple of hours every day for the next week, and you'll go see some, I promise. I find it amazing when I speak to people like, oh, I've lived in Cornwall for 30 years and I've never seen a dolphin. And you're like, whoa, that's mad. They are everywhere when you start looking. Oh, thank you, Haley. So these were some bottlenose dolphins. I'm going to talk about the three main dolphins that we get around Cornwall. Oh, Stacey, you've never seen one. Okay, you're living in the perfect place now, so there's no excuse. You can go and stare at the sea for hours. Especially as summer's coming, it's much nicer then. Yeah, as well, if you can get binoculars, that does help. So yeah, I'm going to start with these beautiful bottlenose dolphins. It's quite hard to see in this photo. I think I've got some more. There we go. So bottlenose dolphins are the ones that you will basically see in all the photos and sort of films and stuff. They are very, very characterful. They love boats. They love humans. Love coming to say hi. As you can see from the two photos above as well, they're very interactive. They jump out the water a lot. I think this was just during feeding. But when they do their social behaviours as well, they can do a lot of jumping around and flips and things. So they're really fascinating to watch. They're about 4 meters in length, so they're quite large as well. They're probably about half the size of a Minky Whale, which is incredible. They're very sort of robust looking. You can see they're all grey as well. They've got that lovely white belly, so you can sometimes see them if they jump out. You'll notice that lovely belly of theirs. And they're called bottlenose because if you obviously look at the nose there, it's like a little bottle. So that's how they got the name. Very inventive. So around sort of the coast of Cornwall, I think it ranges from North Devon to the other side of North Devon. They think it's a pod of 28 common bottlenose dolphins that we have as a resident pod, which is really good. So that means they're here pretty much all year round. You will occasionally see and hear about the lone males that come and visit. They're often sort of trying to find a pod to fit in with. Some of them actually like being on their own though. I've heard about a lone male in Plymouth before. But when the divers used to get in the water, I was talking to a guy and he used to have to go and fix some stuff around the boats down there. And every time he got in, this male dolphin would come up to him and he'd like almost show him the way down to the bottom. So yeah, they're really incredible creatures. And to have that happen in like Plymouth, it's just so, so cool. So yeah, they're really awesome. I must admit, I think I'm a little bit scared of them though, because I think they're so big and so intelligent that it's like, oh my gosh, I can imagine if you're in the water with one, it'd be like, hi, you're huge. But yeah, they're really cool. And what they do as well for feeding is they slap their tails in the water and against the fish, and it stuns their fish, so it doesn't kill them, it just stuns them, and they'll go and eat them. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah, pretty cool though. So next we've got the common dolphins. So these are the ones that you're most likely to see around the coast of Cornwall. They're a bit smaller than bottlenose. They're about half the size, I think. And I always think it's crazy that they're called common dolphins, because if you look at their patterning, I think they're so beautiful. They've got this hourglass figure on them. So you can kind of see especially on that back dolphin there, you can see the grey back half and this lovely white on the front. As well, these guys will tend to be found in much, much bigger pods. There'll be, you know, I think I've seen, the biggest I've seen was probably about 200, 300, which is just crazy. When you're amongst it, you're like, whoa, like everywhere you look is these fins coming up. Yeah, they're really cool. And if you're ever out on a boat, they also will probably come and have a little nosy around and see what you're up to. It's really cool. So I've got a bit of a video, which I'm really hoping works. So I've got to... Here it is. So this was out in Penzance, was when I was on the boat. You can see it from the shore as well, but obviously we're on the boat, so we were a bit closer. But if you notice as well, you can see all those gannets circling. I'm hoping this is working for everyone. But yeah, you can see the gannets above, so that's kind of what you need to look out for. Yay, that's good. Oh no, it's just me. No, I got good. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, so it's really crazy. So hopefully you guys will see that this summer if you have a little look out. Keep spotting those gannets. And then finally, we're going to move on to my favourite dolphins, which I have only seen once in Cornwall, but I think they're incredible. You do see them probably a couple of times a year, and that's the Porpoises dolphins. And I just think they're so awesome because they look so smiley. And as you can see, they haven't got a beak like the other ones. They've just got this kind of round, bulbous head, which is really good for echolocation, so they can hunt out their fish and things. Yeah, they're so cute. They've got this lovely bulb head. So they're much more shy than the common. They are gorgeous. They're much more shy, which is probably why you sort of never see them. They won't tend to come up to boats. They do. They're like narwhals, but without the little pointy bit. And what I find really fascinating about them is when they're born, they're this really, really dark grey colour. And then, like us, as they get older, they become lighter and lighter grey, so they go white. So you can kind of tell their age about how white they are, which I think is really cute. But you can also see on them all these sort of scratches and markings, which again is a really good way to ID individuals. But also it's how they socialize is like they scrape their teeth against each other. And like when we kind of like scratch ourselves, it brings up those little white marks. These guys, unfortunately, when they scratch each other, it stays on their skin permanently because the skin's quite sensitive. But I think it's really cool. It's like having all their little stories written on their skin. So I think they're really cool. Now, I saw these guys when I was out in the Azores, and we had a really cool experience with a juvenile that was being extremely cheeky. So I'm going to show you a little video of that as well. It's quite long. The little bits of it plain, but hopefully. So you can see this beautiful little juvenile, and he's so playful and curious. Stunning to watch, and he kind of like disappears for a little bit, and you're like, oh no. And then in a second, hopefully. Start to see a few little shadows. And then if you listen there, I don't know if you can hear it, you can hear the echolocation clicking. But you can see Mummy's come to pick him up because someone was being a bit too naughty and a bit too inquisitive, so he's been taken away. Which was just so cute. It just reminds me of like a little toddler running around the park being like, oh my god, this is so fun, and mum just was like, what are you doing? Come back. But yeah, being able to hear the echolocation as well is so cool. You can ever got an opportunity to, you know, if you're with dolphins and you can put a GoPro under the water, it often picks up the sound. I'm not sure how long they stay with their moms for, Kate. I think it's their oh, I'm sorry, Jessica. I will. I've actually got them on YouTube somewhere, so I'll send some links in just a second. And then hopefully you can watch them from there. I don't know how long they stay with the mums for. Their Risos are a bit more social, so if they're females, they'll probably stay in that mothering group. Whereas the males, they tend to get a bit more dominant, so they often have to go off and start their own kind of little packs. But they can live for about 30 years or so, so it's pretty cool. Yeah. With the echolocation, you can hear it there and then, but you have to have a special thing, which is a hydrophone. That's the one. And there's actually the guy that makes them lives down in Mousehole, and he like ships them all over the world, which I think is well cool. But what I did find is that I could hear it if you were holding a pole, like a metal pole, with the camera on the end. You could hear the clicks through that if you were listening really carefully, and it was really quiet, which is really cool. So you can't always hear it. If you ever get a chance, you can sometimes snorkel with them in the wild as well. If they tend to approach you, if you go underwater with them, you can hear them, which is really crazy. I know one of my friends did it. I was a bit too scared to do it because I was like, oh, they're quite big. But one of my friends did it, and she had a dolphin swim up to her and look at her and scan her up and down with the echolocation and then swim off, and she said it was so bizarre. But their echolocation can be really powerful as well, especially from things like sperm whales. You have to be really careful with some of them. Sperm whales can actually knock you out, which is pretty crazy if they get you like head on. So I wouldn't advise doing that. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So next we were going to move on to, yeah, include harbour porpoise as well. Now, not many people know much about harbour porpoises. Like, generally, you don't notice them. They tend to surface once. You'll see this tiny triangle fin, and then they'll just disappear again. They might surface again a few seconds later, and then they're kind of gone. But funny enough, there's so many around Cornwall, that's what you're tend to more likely to see. But it gets really annoying because you see one fin and you're like, oh, look at this. And then you go to show everyone else and they're like, what? I just see the sea. There's nothing there. And you're like, it was a fin, I promise. So yeah, it's really cool. And I think what's super special as well is that, oh, that's really sad, Stacey. It is really sad when things kind of wash up. Yeah, but I think we're quite lucky in a way in Cornwall because harbour porpoises, not many people know things about them. They're very mysterious creatures. So when things do wash up, it's really good because a lot of the people, the Marine Strandings Network in particular, can come out and assess it. And when they do those post-mortems, they can find out more. So we're lucky we live in a place with really dedicated teams that can help use that to sort of figure out things. But yeah, what's really cool is that they think Mounts Bay in Penzance, stretching around kind of the lizard, is a really important place for them. They get sort of hundreds, maybe even thousands of sightings there each year, and that's kind of the most common place they've been seen ever. They are a global species as well, but they think they might come to Mounts Bay to actually breed. So yeah, it's really, really cool to think there's something sort of so special just there. I think they look quite cute as well. quite funny little faces. Awesome. I think it was around August time. They're here all year round though, but I think it was around August. Duncan from Marine Discovery, you have a chat to him. He's doing loads of studies on it. He's absolutely obsessed with harbor porpoises. It's quite funny because most people are like not that bothered because you only see them once and they're gone. What is cool as well, he spotted a lewistic one, which is basically albino. They're completely white. And he spotted that I think 2 years in a row. So that's really cool because he knows it hasn't stayed here, but it has returned. So that's pretty cool. Okay, I have a lot more of this presentation, so I don't know whether I'm going to finish it all. I don't know how long you guys have, but we'll see how we go. I can always do some more at a different point. I was just going to mention two of my favourite fish as well, because I think they're really awesome. One of them is the sunfish, and I put the Latin name because I think it's really cool. It's called Molla Molla. But they're these, basically they're like this massive dustbin lid shaped fish. They're kind of, they swim vertically in the water column. So they're like that, but like super wide like that. And what's really crazy is that they come up to the surface and they lie flat on the surface. And that's one of the reasons they're called sunfish, because they bask in the sun. But I think what's really awesome is they've been recorded in Cornwall. They will come and harass seagulls, and they'll slap them with those fins and be like, yo, come here, seagull. And then if it's a juvenile seagull, they tend to go over and they'll actually sit there and pick the parasites off of the sunfish. So it's kind of like this symbiotic relationship. Whereas if it's an adult seagull, it just gets really annoying and just flies off, which I think is really awesome. They're literally found all over the world as well. So they're found everywhere from Iceland down to Chile. So they're a really global species. You get loads of different slight variants. What's crazy as well is that they can get to about 10 feet long. So I think it's on the next slide. You can see how huge they can get. It's incredible. And they are the heaviest bony fish in the world. So they can weigh more than a car. They're about 2,000 kilograms, which is insane. My favourite thing though is their face. As you can kind of see, it's like a really shocked little so yeah, I think it's really awesome. They've got like this almost like beak thing as well to kind of eat jellyfish with. So I think they're really cool. And then of course the other wonderful fish we get here is the basking shark. These are incredible species, but from what I've heard, they're also really dumb. So you can see this amazingly large mouth that basically filter feeds the plankton. Oh, I can understand why. They kind of look a bit scary. But basically I've heard that when swimmers have been in the water and a basking shark has approached them, if you don't move out the way of the basking shark, it can't really see, so it will just hit you. So it's just like they just go in a straight line and they turn around and they go in another straight line. Like that's it. They have no conscience as to what is around them. But I think they're pretty awesome. They can grow to about 8 meters long as well, so they're pretty humongous. It's about the same size as the Minky Whale, so it's kind of weird to think about. What's kind of cool is that no one actually knows where they give birth still. They think they've seen mating rituals off of Porthcurno before, where they've all lined up in a row. This was about 20 years ago, I think. Yeah, they just all line up in a row, essentially, and they didn't really know what they were doing, but they assumed it might have been a mating ritual of some sorts. Yeah, no one really knows. No one knows where they go to give birth. They just kind of reappear every summer, come and eat some plankton, and then disappear again. Is it true that they feel like sun people? I think so. I've never touched one, but yeah, from what I can imagine, their skin's probably pretty rough. Yeah. Okay, and then on to one of my favorite things. Can anyone guess what this is? Yes, it's a lobster. This is one of the little baby lobsters that the hatchery releases. So this guy's about 2 months old. Lobsters, I think, are absolutely incredible creatures. They basically look the same. but they're just really colourful when they're young. They're so cute. So yeah, they start their life as plankton, so they're really small. Basically, lovely food for all the whales that are around, which is great. But it does mean that only about 1 in 20,000 lobsters survives. So it's pretty hard work, which is why the hatchery is there, to basically help rear them up and release them when they're a bit older, so they can kind of fend for themselves. So here's a lovely adult lobster, the European lobster. They're really awesome. They can regenerate all their limbs as well. So if they lose a claw or a leg or anything, they can just grow it back again. They are stunning. You get some beautiful colours on them. So they're really, really cool creatures. Yeah. I'm not going to go too much into lobsters because I'll probably be here forever. So I was going to start on Rockpools now. We're about halfway through, but I think the Rockpool half's going to be a little bit quicker. So do you guys want to carry on, or do you want to come back at a different time? I know it's already been like almost an hour. Yeah, cool, okay. I'm just going to have some water really quickly. Yay, good. So next, I was going to go on to basically what you can find in rock pools. Now, rock pooling I always find is something you do as a kid, and when you get to an adult, you're like, I can't do that. I'm not a kid anymore. But it's still so much fun. Like, it's so awesome. What I'd recommend doing as well is taking a snorkel mask down and sticking your head in a rock pool. It's so cool and so interesting. You notice so much, and you're like involved in this tiny ecosystem that's just like the size of your head. So yeah, if you fancy doing something a bit different in the summer, totally stick on a snorkel mask and get rock pooling. It's really cool. So I was going to show you some of the common species that you'll hopefully find whilst you're rock pooling. You can literally do it wherever as well. The whole of the Cornish coast is awesome for it. So first off, we've got the little shore crab, also known as the green crab sometimes, even though it doesn't green here. So what's really cool with shore crabs is when they're young like this one, they start off with this kind of weird motley pattern, and they can all be quite different. So they can be quite hard to ID through their colour. But if you have a look around their eyes, you can kind of see these little ridges. And if you count the ridges, they've got 5 ridges on either side of their eyes. They've got these like 2 little stalky eyes that pop out. And they should have like 3 ridges in the middle. So that's quite a good way to tell them apart. If you've ever been crabbing as well, that's most likely the ones you'll find. They're normally a bit more robust and big by that point. But they're really good to find. If you literally turn over a couple of rocks or just keep flicking through seaweed, eventually you'll find this little crab scuttling out. They're really cool. They haven't got too much of a pinch, but I wouldn't recommend sort of sticking your hands underneath them. When you pick them up, if you pick them up either side of their carapace, do them that way, that's the best way, especially because a lot of people get taught to kind of scoop them up underneath. But with female crabs in particular, they store their eggs underneath. So if you kind of pick them up underneath, you can actually crush their eggs. So if you just pick them up just behind their front claws on either side, it's a good way to hold them, and you can have a close look at them. And they shouldn't be able to pinch you, which is the best part. Where the fully grown females as well, they can have about 1 million eggs underneath, which is crazy. And when you pick them up, they'll look like, if it's got eggs on, it'll just be like this big orange foamy mass. It's a bit weird, but it's quite a good way to see, and quite interesting to have a little look at. So next up, we have the edible crab. It was funny, when I was looking through my photos to put in this presentation, I realised I don't have a photo of an edible crab yet. Yeah, I see them quite a lot. So that's something for me to do this week. Let's go find an edible crab. But they're the ones that often get called the pasty crab down here in Cornwall. And you'll see that on the front of them, they've almost got this like pie ridge, and they look like pasties essentially with their shape as well. So you can call them the pasty crab. They're normally sort of very orangey, and they've got these black tips to their claws. Now these are the ones you really need to be careful of if they pinch you. So they can grow to about 20 centimeters in size, so quite large. And if they pinch your finger, it's about 90 pounds per inch they can crush. And we did have one of our poor technicians at the hatchery, it latched onto her finger while she was feeding it. And we had to get the other technician to prise the claw open. And then her nail turned black and fell off, and she actually lost her feeling in the finger for about 3 months. So I'd be really careful of these guys. Lessons learned on that one. But yeah, they're pretty interesting little crabs. As well, if you've ever eaten a crab sandwich, this was probably the little guy that you're eating. And then next up, we have the most terrifying crab. I've got a little video of this one. Where is it? There it is. So this guy is a velvet swimming crab. I personally find them terrifying because they've got these orange eyes, red eyes even, that like look at you. You can see him going to pinch me and I'm like, nope, I'm okay. But yeah, I always find them pretty, that's what I meant to do, sorry everyone. I find them pretty scary. They are cool. So what's really cool is they're called velvet swimming crabs basically because their back, if you touch it, it's really furry and it feels like velvet. They've got these little hairs on it. And then I'm not sure if you can see in that video, but it's got this like these two back paddly legs that are really flat. And that's basically so they can swim up and down the water column. So whereas most other crabs will just crawl along the bottom, these guys can actually swim up and down. And they have these amazing, quite like purpley, bluey, fluorescent lines on them as well. They are quite pretty apart from their terrifying eyes. But yeah, they're very fast, as you can see by that one, and they can take down fish and things like that. So they're pretty scary little crabs, but you will see them from time to time. So they're pretty awesome. And then we have got the wonderful hermit crab. So these guys I think are really cool. I think hermit crabs, yeah, definitely. Hermit crabs are probably my favourite species of crab because they're so cute. If you've ever seen one out of its shell, it's really bizarre though because they've got like this kind of cool like front body part that you can see, and then this weird like hooky, squishy body part on the inside that hooks around in the shell. They're normally pretty small. They're only about 3 centimeters. And they'll often sort of compete for the old snail shells. They tend to like dog-wonk shells in particular. So it's quite fun when you see them competing because they'll like drag each other out of a shell. So they tend to find one once they're born with the shells. So what they'll do is they'll move up as they get bigger. So if they're sort of outgrowing their shell a little bit, they'll find a different one. And that's kind of how the competition starts sometimes, because they look at another shell and they're like, I know there's lots of shells around, but like that dude that's in that shell, I really want his shell. So they'll like drag each other out of the shell and fight. And then whoever kind of becomes more dominant will go into that shell, and the other one's left to like scurry off and find a new one. Poor little hermit crab. But yeah, they're pretty cool. They can live up to about 150 centimeters down as well. So they're about 1.5 meters down, which is quite cool. So they're in that intertidal zone. Yeah, they're quite common in rock pools. I always find them like in waves though. So where was it? There was somewhere on the south coast once where I found like hundreds and hundreds. So that's a good one for you to look for, Stacey. Little hermit crab. And then another type of hermit crab, we've got the St. Piran's crab. These guys are really cool. they have a really cool story as well. So they actually disappeared from the UK shoreline in the 1960s, and they, yeah, basically completely disappeared. Thought they'd gone extinct from our coast. And then someone was rockpooling in 2016, I think it was, only 5 years ago, and they actually came across one of these guys, a Heron's crab. Now, they have a different name, I can't remember what they were called before, but because they found this crab, basically, they did a competition to rename it, and it, of course, became the St. Piran crab because it was found in Cornwall. And also St. Piran was thought to have been a hermit and survived being thrown into the sea once, so it worked quite well for St. Piran's crab. What I find really interesting with these guys, though, a good way to separate them from the hermit crab, which I'll say, if you have a look at their eyes and they're like little antennae bits, the hermit crab's eyes are really yellow, and then if you look at this guy, he's got these awesome like black eyes with little, when you look at them really closely, they're like these little white dots that like kind of glow, and then he's got these beautiful red antennae as well that flick out, so they're quite cool to see. So yeah, they're definitely worth looking out for. They are still quite hard to find sometimes, but they are getting more and more common. I think again the south coast is really good for them, a bit flatter. I think I saw this one just off of Penrith now. But again, like Castle Beach on Falmouth and Gilly Beach is really good for it too. So yeah, worth having a look out for them. He does look like he has a hat. It's so cute. I love him. All right, and then other things you can find in rock pools are starfish. So I'm going to talk about 3 different types that we get in the rock pool normally. As well, I've stolen this photo. I have a picture of a common starfish for some reason. I've stolen it up of Cornish rock pools. If you want to have a look, it's this lovely lady, and she actually spends her life rock pooling, and it's so cool. She's written some awesome books, some really cool books for kids as well. She's called Heather, and she sometimes runs little rock pooling workshops. I can put the link in there. I just find her fascinating to follow. And if you ever need any help with IDing things or working out what it is, you can message her, and she'll just like loves helping you. So it's really sweet. Oh, Stacey, I've realised it comes up with your name when it should be mine. Sorry, it's early, not Stacey. Just in case you hadn't realised. Oh, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, so Heather's really cool to talk to if you want to have a little look at her website. It's worth doing as well. So the common starfish is pretty cool. I never really see them much on the coast. A lot of people do, but they can be found around 600 meters down, up to the shoreline, so it's pretty deep. They can be found. The most times I've seen them normally is I was working on the research project with Lobster Hatchery. We had like these big mussel pots that we were like on-growing lobsters in, and we were chucking them down, not chucking them, carefully placing them in the ocean and letting them grow on before releasing them to a bit bigger size. But you'd pull up these mussel pots and they would just be like absolutely covered in starfish, like you couldn't see anything apart from starfish. So once they kind of find an area they like, they will definitely habitat there. They can live for about 10 years as well, so they can be quite long-lived. What's really crazy is how they eat things. If you're grossed out easily, I'm sorry. This is kind of a bit of a gross thing that they do. But what they'll do is they basically wrap around, say, like a mussel, and they'll prise that mussel open with their tentacles. I don't know if you've ever tried to open a mussel, but it's really hard. So yeah, they'll prise it open. I think the longest it's taken them can be like 2 days. So it's a lot of effort. But essentially, once that muscle's open, they spit their stomach out from the inside to outside. And they kind of inject that muscle to make it like a fluid, and they ingest it on the outside of their body before pulling their stomach back in. Really strange creatures. But yeah, that's a weird weird starfish thing. Pretty crazy. But the other species, yeah, the other species you're likely to see is spiny starfish. They're normally very white, lots of spikes over them, hence the name. And they've got these lovely purple tips, which I don't know whether you can see on the photo, to the ends of their tentacles, arms. Most of these starfish tend to only have 5 arms as well, but sometimes things go wrong. So if they lose an arm, they can grow them back again. But sometimes they won't kind of process how many they need to grow back. So you sometimes see like some extra arms growing on them, which I think is kind of cool. These guys can reach. No way, that's so bizarre. A flying spiny starfish. Oh, maybe a seagull had picked it up and like dropped it. Yeah, lost its dinner. What they can do, which is quite cool, is that if you ever pick up a starfish, they can kind of do one or two things. They can go really sloppy and they just kind of lose everything and go into this big mess, or they can make themselves completely rigid, and that's kind of the defense against seagulls. Is if they make themselves so solid, the seagull can't swallow them, so they end up dropping them. So maybe that's what happened. But they can grow to about 70 centimeters. So, like, you know, that's a pretty large starfish. I think they're pretty awesome. And then finally, the tiniest starfish that you can find. Oh, that's so cool. Do you know what colour it was? Was it like a... It's quite hard to describe. Sometimes you get the really like bright red sun stars. I think that's what they're called. I've always wanted to see one of them, but I haven't. And they've got like more arms to them. They just look like the sun, basically. They're really cool. But this is probably like the coolest one, I think, is the cushion star. As you can see, it's a bit more like a cushion. They're really tiny. They're only about 5 centimeters across max. Oh, that's so cool. But yeah, so they kind of called the cushion star because they look like a little poopy cushion. These are the ones that I tend to find the most. I don't know why. I don't know whether what I found, if you look under seaweed in a rock pool, especially this like purpley type stuff, and you keep kind of searching through the seaweed, you'll often find them in there. They're really, really cute. And once you found one, like, you won't stop seeing them then. They're really cool. And what's another really cool thing about these guys is they're all born male, and then as they get older, once they reach a certain size, they become female. So I think that's really quite an interesting thing. Right. Okay. And then we've got the little common blenny. So these are the types of fish that you're basically most likely to see in a rock pool. If you've ever looked at a rock pool and there's these like little fish darting everywhere, that's normally the blennies. That's so good, Jessica. Oh, I know it's so hard because you're like, I know it's like the circle of life, but you also like want those starfish to survive. Yeah, I think the common blenny's got such a happy little face. What's really crazy though is that those jaws, they can actually prise limpets off of rocks, so they have a really strong bite. So if you're ever picking up a big one, I'd be kind of careful. They're really cute though. You get some different types of blenny too. You get the Montagues and the tompots, which I'm going to show you in just a second. What's really cool about blennies as well, they can change colour. So depending on where they are, it won't be like a chameleon changing colour. It's more like light and dark. I always find it really fascinating. You can watch them go into a dark hole and they'll go basically completely black. They'll come out onto the sand or in the lighter areas and go this lovely mottly colour. and you actually see it happen, which is really, really fascinating to watch. Something else that's really cool about them is that they can stay out of water for up to 6 hours, so they can actually sort of stay in damp, wet environments and wait for the tide to come back in if they get stuck somewhere when the tide goes out. That's kind of a picture from the side, so you might be able to recognise them a bit easier. So cool. This is as well during the summer last year. I found loads of eggs, so you can see all those tiny little flecks of the eyes of the baby blennies, which I thought was super cute. And then I don't know whether in the very background you can kind of see the eye of the blenny as well. It tends to be the male that looks after the eggs as well, rather than the female. For once, the female's got a bit of an easier job. And then I put the Montague's bunny in here as well because I think they're really pretty. They've got all these like electric blue dots over them. And then I don't know whether you can see, especially on the top left and the right photo, I don't know how you're looking at this. Yeah. Yeah, they are quite newt-like. They're kind of like newts without the legs almost. They do that skimming along the bottom. Yeah, they're really cool. The Montague bunny's got that little like kind of little fin at the top. I don't know if it's a fin, what's it called? But it's really cool. And then I haven't got a picture of tompots on here, but tompots have got 2 fluffy orange eyebrows, which are really awesome. Yeah, I thought I'd just include them. They're cute. And does anyone know what these beautiful blobs are? You'll normally see them all over the rocks and they're all squishy. Very close game. Yeah! They're anemones. Beadlet ones in particular. Well done, Leah. Totally remembered that from our surveying. So these are beadlet anemones. So this is what they look like when they're out of water. No, in water even. Out of water, they become these like big jelly blobs. They just don't look very attractive at all. And you shouldn't do it. But I've seen kids do it. It's quite funny. But when you squish them, like they do a little jet of water, which I wouldn't recommend doing. But that's because they're holding all the water inside. Keep them nice and moist. So the beadlet anemones are really interesting. You can see they've got these lovely blue beads around the outside, and they are actually sting cells. So you wouldn't believe it, but these little blobs are actually really territorial. They don't like other anemones coming near them, so they'll use those little beads and they will sting each other, and sometimes they can actually fire them off and sting each other as well, which is quite interesting. So it kind of forces the other anemones to move on. But they're pretty cool. Anemones are great as well. They do poo and eat from the same place. They're a very basic organism. They're yeah, good. They're a good one to always show kids as well. I always find there's lots of interesting things about them. And then we have got the strawberry anemone. So obviously you can probably tell why this one's called a strawberry anemone. Very aptly named because it looks like a strawberry. So it's very similar to the beadlet anemone, but it tends to be quite a lot bigger. Yeah, they're really beautiful. They tend to be found in a lot of overhangs and a lot of dark places. You can pretty much find them on every beach again as well. Just look in those dark areas pretty much. They'll be a lot bigger. So beadlets can be like really tiny sometimes, but you can get sort of ones that are about that big. So they're really chunky, a bit more girthy looking, but I just think they're really, really pretty. And then snakelucks and anemones, which I think are my favourite looking ones. You can kind of see why they're named like they are. Yes, very. So snakelucks are really, really cool. They actually live with like a symbiotic algae, so that's like an algae that uses the anemone and the anemone uses the algae. So it's kind of like a mutual relationship between them. So this algae lives in the tentacles of the anemone, and it uses sunlight to basically produce this energy. So the snake lock benefits because it gets this lovely energy, and the algae benefits because it gets all the sunlight that it needs. The hard thing, I think, for the snake locks is that they need to be in a lot of direct sunlight for this algae. But at the same time, unlike the other two, they can't retract their tentacles quite as much. So you can see it at that top, they kind of can, but when they're really long, like one on the left, they can't retract them. So they can't obviously be out of the water or else they'll dry out. So it's finding the right balance of like sun and water. But yeah, they're really, really cool. And if you haven't before, definitely try night rockpooling. It's obviously best to go in a group, but if you can get a hold of an ultraviolet light and take it down rockpooling, you'll be absolutely amazed. And snake locks are one of the ones they'll absolutely glow fluorescently. Yeah, they're really, really cool. I really enjoy them. So next we have maybe once this is all like everything's back to normal, we can do a night rockpooling session somewhere. That would be really cool. So these are daisy anemones. I must admit it took me ages to ID these because I've never really seen them before. But then again, it's like most things, once you see them once, that's when you find them everywhere. But they're really cool. They're just like, they kind of look like daisies, like I said. You can see the mottled patterning on them. Yeah, let's do some night rockpooling. Maybe we'll rockpooling and then night rockpooling. Double rockpool. Yeah, so these guys, they could have around 500 to 1,000 tentacles, which is pretty mad. You can kind of see all these layers here. They can come across as like a carpet sometimes. They literally, you look at the rock and it's like this very like tentacly carpet. But it's really cool. But they can also spread themselves very open, like the one on the left there. So I think it's worth looking out for them. I've always found them really dark crevices. And as well, a good time to rockpool is when the tide's really low, especially on spring tides. You can get down a lot further and find species like this that you don't tend to see on the higher shore. So I'd recommend doing that as well. And then finally, the Dahlia anemone. I think these are really stunning. What's really cool about these is that they're always different as well. They're quite hard to ID because the colours vary so much. But they tend to have around quite like sort of short tentacles, and their tentacles, not so much on this one, but normally they tend to be quite striped. So that's quite a good way to tell them apart. And the column tends to have so the column is the bit that holds the tentacles essentially at the bottom. So when they're a bit more closed up, you can see the column like you could on the snake locks there on the top right. And what's quite cool about the Dahlia ones is what they'll do is they've got this like really bumpy surface, and they'll stick the sand and the rock to it and stuff to help them kind of camouflage in and secure themselves down, which is really cool. But yeah, I think they're really beautiful. And then finally, I think this is my almost last slide. I thought I'd do a quick one on nudibranchs because they are so cute. This is called a sea hare, and you can kind of see why because she's got little ears like a hare. And what's kind of interesting about sea hares is that they're not actually sea slugs; they are snails. But their shell is inside of their body, so it's like this translucent shell. But I think June time is quite a good time to see them normally. I think last year I spotted them, and you end up seeing like this weird mating thing where they just like all stacked on top of each other. It's very strange. Yeah, they're really cool. They can be quite big as well. They can get to about 20 centimeters, so they can be pretty huge. But again, like look on seaweeds, keep searching through seaweeds to kind of find them because that's what eats mainly. But yeah, I think they're really, really awesome. You get so many different types as well. So you get other nudibranchs, one really hard to find. That's why I'd recommend going to that Cornish Rockpools, because Heather's done a whole book on nudibranchs. They're just the coolest things. You can get all these different colours and these patterns. I don't know whether I put. Yeah. So this is some other ones. And they're by Heather, those photos, so you can see how lush they are. Oh, that's really cool, Kate. I'll have to have a look at that. I don't think I've seen it. Literally like a disco slug. They're so cool. There's over 100 different species in the UK, so they're really cool. I think like there's other ones that you get like the lemon, I think they're called lemon nudibranchs or something like that, and they're really tiny. Super, super cute. No way, I need to watch that, Kate. That sounds incredible. Best thing ever. So I thought I'd finish off with, if there's any David Bowie fans, some David Bowie styles that have been based clearly on nudibranchs, which I think are awesome. So good. Ah, thank you, Kate. That's so cool. That's amazing. So yeah, I think that is the end. Sorry, I'm aware that was a lot of me talking at you. But if you have any questions at all, let me know. I'm just going to try and send you those videos as well. I can get my computer to work fast enough. Oh, thank you guys. I'm glad you enjoyed it. What I will say as well before you guys head off, obviously this talk was in aid for the BDMLR, so after this session ends, you will be redirected to the fundraising page. If you can donate, that would be amazing. I know it's a really hard time for everyone at the moment. So even if you can like just share the fundraiser or whatever, we'd really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you guys for coming. I hope that was okay. That's the first time I've done a talk, so whew, it's really weird doing it in your bedroom as well. Oh, thank you guys. I will, if I maybe send out a link with all the videos on in case you want to watch them, just because my computer's a bit slow. Yes, there is, Leah. On the BDMLR website, you can train to volunteer. I think they do training days like twice a year. It's called a Marine Mammal Medic course. Cool. I will see if I can find it for you. I don't know whether they're doing any at the moment. If you want to do it, I'll do it with you because I'd like to train as well. That would be quite cool. That's it. Thank you. It's a good plan. Out of popping season. Yay! That would be awesome. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna end the session unless anyone's got any other questions at all. You can always message us or me on Quiet Connections. Thank you guys. Have a lovely evening. That's perfect, Hayley. I think Nuki would be good for me and Leah. Awesome, right, I'll see you guys soon. Have a lovely evening. Bye. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. Da, da, da.